This is the voice of Bold Business Radio, and I am your host, Jessica Duell of Red Direction. You are listening to Lead Like Dorothy Boyd. When I set up this conversation, we've had to reschedule it 3 times. I'm not sure if the topic is hard for people or they don't understand the topic, but when it came right down to it, we decided this was the day. Zala joined us and Scott joins us. And I have to tell you, you guys know Scott from behind the scenes, so you'll get to hear his voice again. Those of you who know about the Jess Plus Scott show, it's wonderful to have him back. You guys will love this program as well. So getting back to what is Leading Like Dorothy Boyd. Renee Zellweger played the part of Dorothy Boyd in Jerry Maguire. She is the love interest. She is the supporting actress. One of the things, though, was from the sidelines, from her own strength, from her own clarity, from her own expectations that she held everybody else around her to, in addition to herself, made Jerry Maguire better for it, more sure of himself, clearer about what he wanted, shifting gears a little bit to expand beyond just the tackle and obtain, building wealth, to building physical wealth, monetary wealth, and also emotional wealth. And I think that that's really what this conversation that I have with Zala and Scott really brings out. This concept of being fierce, this concept of whether we're in empire building mode or building our legacy, but there are 2 sides to that. We can be in more of a collaborative, how do we continue to build from this? Or we can be a me versus you, an in versus out. This concept of holding on to what we have at all costs, and the courage to know when it makes sense and is it working, and that we change just like circumstances change, and it's how we approach them. You're going to hear about clarity. You are going to hear about holding expectations. You are going to hear about mistakes. You're going to hear some crazy stories too, and why it's bold, what makes it bold for today. I want to introduce you to Zala Britel, who is from Slovenia. She joins us today and is a digital marketer and content creator with a passion for digital storytelling. She empowers people to find and tell their stories online and offline, passionately supporting people to flex their mindset and turn their vices and weaknesses into their advantages and sources of strength. Zala appreciates people who make her laugh, also love coffee as much as she does, and she doesn't know it, but I know tea is probably part of this, as well as everything in the cinema, Dorothy Boyd, and dogs. I tell you what, anybody with a soft spot for animals has a place in my heart automatically. Scott Scowcroft is a technical editor. He has done TV production for a very long time, a lot of his career, both in a marketing sense as well as a technical sense. He was the Scott in the Jess Plus Scott show, and you'll see more of those coming too. One of the things that I really like about Scott is his worldview that is very large and his experience that is vast. From where he is and the experiences that he has, we can really take that and move past this concept of leadership into actual ideas that make leaders, that allow people to choose, act, and own what goes on around them. Enjoy this conversation.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Duell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
Before we started recording, we've been talking about a lot of different things. And one of the things I was talking about, or started to talk about, and then got distracted, because everybody who listens to the show knows I have like 3 ideas at a time, and we go down a ton of rabbit holes, and then we find rabbit holes within rabbit holes. We just kind of see where we go. Now, Zala, who is joining us today, is up for this task and this ride. She is filled with energy, a lot of great ideas. I can't wait for you guys to get to hear some of the things that she says. See, I told you I was going to start with a story, went around that whole big thing, and now here I am, the story. Leading Like Dorothy Boyd really is about this concept of what do we stand for and how do we get that stuff done. And I picked Dorothy Boyd for a variety of reasons, mostly because there's a lot of leadership qualities there that transcend our personal life and our business life, and how much the overlap there is, even when values of a business or the mission of a business is its own thing, and the values of our life and the journey that we're on in our life is its own thing. All right, so we're going to just jump right in with our question, which is, what traits does the Dorothy Boyd character in Jerry Maguire display that women leaders can learn from and emulate? Zala, tell us what you think.
Well, for me, this is a very, very interesting question, and I've often put a lot of thought in it. The first thing that kind of popped into my mind, also, reflecting back on all of my female bosses and female entrepreneurs I worked with, it's the one thing that we call being fierce. Being fierce in saying what we believe in, expressing our values, what, for example, we envision for ourselves, and being fierce not only in communicating with each other or fierce about our goals, our visions, and about how we want to see us and our companies or our jobs, families, our business. Being also fierce in stepping up, giving your full self to the conversation, to the business, to whatever you do. I think this is also a really good moment where it shows very well when you put your values up front. So people can not only see what are your values, what you stand for, but they can also see the purpose behind it. Why I'm doing this, why I'm going this path, and I am fierce about following the path that I would like to, because I think that's the best for me. Is the best for me, for other people that I lead, or for the company that I work for, or for my entrepreneurial path that I have. It's my European background and also the background that I'm coming from. I was always taught to believe that, and I always saw that emulated in the female colleagues that I had. And I wish that we can change this, is that, for example, we start from within ourselves and we get to know ourselves, our advantages and disadvantages, and we kind of work on what are our vices or what are the things that are holding us back that can be converted in a way into our advantages and can inspire other people. It's about pushing ourselves every day a little bit, not only to inspire ourselves, but also other people. So it's like, inspiring me and others, not just by saying something, but actually emulating the behavior and changes that we want to see.
I'm telling you what, where have you been and why have you not been here before? So everybody, Scott, because you see him behind the scenes and you see his name around, he's actually part of our conversation today. Zala and I, we were talking and we were like, we want Scott to be the male representative voice of this conversation. Scott, what do you think about what Zala said?
Well, I was very impressed with what you were saying, and what I have to say dovetails right off of that. And first of all, thank you, Jess, for including me in this conversation. I don't know if my views will be typical of anyone or anything, but we'll see how that...
They are Scott's views.
I've been thinking about the empire building phase that people have. Because I'm a little older now, I'm beginning to think about legacy, and I'm able to compare and contrast the two. And then, Jess, your conversation today is actually making that a little bit deeper, because during the empire building, that's when you are becoming yourself. And then legacy, of course, is passing it on to others, presumably. As you are creating your empire, which I think is perfectly good, there are two ways of doing it. The collaborative model, if I help you and if I help everyone else go up the ladder, they will also quite naturally help me. We'll all find our various strengths, and it's a beautiful world that we live in. But sometimes people who are in empire building mode see it as me against you, and boy, if I can be in the rat race and if I can crawl up that pillar, as it were, and be the top dog, then, man, my empire is just great. And then in legacy, can also be the same thing. Am I trying to benefit the world, or am I trying to just secure my ego, or whatever that
Protect those assets.
Protect those assets.
Right. Yeah. One thing that comes to mind out of every single thing that you guys said is courage. And courage is a skill. It can be innate, but it does not have to be innate. We can all learn to be courageous. And in fact, every single one of us in our lives has faced something that we have knowingly or unknowingly walked into and had to deal with the outcomes of that because they were just there. We made choices knowingly or unknowingly, and then the outcomes of that may have been a complete surprise. They may have been a complete surprise in a positive way, but they also could be a complete surprise in a very detrimental, almost fatalist type of way. When we're courageous, it's remembering that I may get lost and I may forget my values when this stuff happens to me. I remember when Carter was an infant, my almost 6-year-old now. And one thing that we noticed was there are these rhythms. And then once we noticed it in Carter, we saw it in myself and Ryan, my husband. And then as I was getting even better at understanding this rhythm, I could see it in business. I could see it in my business relationships. I could see it in the cycles that a business itself goes through. And being able to see that rhythm doesn't mean we can control it, because courage is not about control. Courage is about knowing that there's only a little bit that we actually can control, recognizing what we can't control, and just making a step forward when and how we can to stand up for what is right. And what is right could be a whole other conversation, because there's a big spectrum of that as well. There's a sense of clarity that we need to have. So I'm curious, was there a moment or an idea or a place or a time that you really were in the middle of something, knowingly or unknowingly, and all of a sudden there was, and it happens different for everybody. For me, it's and it's like everything goes into slow motion, kind of like the Matrix, when everything goes into slow motion and you can see it. And it's just so clear. Everything is so clear about what will happen next, the action that will be taken. Is there a time that you guys are willing to share around that, this clarity that you've had?
Wow, that's just amazing. I'm returning the not only compliment, but hey Jess, where have you been? And why have I missed all your stories and all this conversation before? Hello. When I was listening to you, I just wanted to say all the time, yes, 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 exactly. And listening to you, I remembered my first boss. He was a very, very nice man. He taught me a lot about business, but there's one thing that he told me: work hard and always know your worth. So don't forget that, because always knowing your worth will save you so many times when times get difficult and hard, when there will be hardships and challenges. And actually that is what I remembered most. My personal story was so many different skills that I have and so many different areas that I worked in. I was never really very niched or focused. And you can imagine that whatever company I worked in or whatever job I did, I was either too spread out or too knowledgeable or too just, not enough focused. Basically, it took me a lot of time to get clear with myself and say, I'm really, really not happy what I'm doing, and I need to find another way for myself, for, the companies I work for the people around me who are clearly unhappy with me. I can't dip my toes anymore. I need to take a dive and jump in. And that was one for me, really, that I call it kind of a mythical moment, because I remember it clearly. I was totally relaxed, and I actually said to myself, because everybody said, no, but you're going to be an entrepreneur and you're a woman, and oh my God, oh my goodness, that's so difficult, and so on. I was just at peace with myself, and I said, so what if I will jump in? I know how to swim, so what's the worst that can happen? Okay, I will fail once, twice, 3 times, or no, maybe, I will succeed and I will be really happy and I will finally fulfill my purpose. And it was that moment of being in the zone. Mikhail tells in his flow book, when you're in the flow, when you're one with yourself and you're exactly where you want to be, doing exactly what you want, and you're fulfilling a purpose that is greater than yourself.
One of the things when you were talking about that, I was not happy with myself. The best advice I ever received was to know my worth. You buckled down and applied discipline to that. You became disciplined to say, I'm going to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Scott, what
Yeah.
about you?
One of the ways I understand the world is something I read a while ago. You grow up in your home and everything is taken care of, and then you leave home and everything is absolutely different. You change your context between the time that you are the child of your parents. Okay, you leave home and you just become an entirely different person. You learn who you are, and then you can come back and you can be more of a friend to your parents. They'll always be your dad or your mom. People go through this several times, at least once in their lifetime, and sometimes 2 or 3 times. And it sounds like you decided to change the context of your life, and that is very courageous. You don't know how it's going to turn out, but because you are going to be more who you are, you're going to end up happier and more prosperous, and that special thing that you can do in the world is going to manifest itself, and it would not do that unless you went through the fire and you were courageous. Jess, you had talked about our stories as well, and as you know, several years ago, I was working in the marketing department of a hospital, and they laid a number of people off, and they always do, not the patient-facing people, but those in the marketing department. At that moment was a moment of truth for me. It was a change of context, and I've said that I've been a reluctant entrepreneur because I've always enjoyed the safety of working for a corporation, having things taken care of. It's scary being an entrepreneur. It didn't happen overnight, but as I kind of grew into it, it became, well, hey, I kind of like what this is doing. It's mindfully figuring out, in my opinion, what you want to do. And sometimes it's not what you want to do. You just have to do it. You're thrown into it, and then you courageously figure out what it is, and then hopefully you can land on your feet on the other side and then go from there.
You mentioned an interesting word, safety. It's a construct of we're safe, and anything outside of that safe means we're failing or we're going to have hard times. It's limiting. And I know for me it was, okay, so I've just been kind of doing this thing for a long time. What if I gave up my biggest contracts because I didn't like them, but they paid the bills? What if I did that with this brand new baby and a husband at the cycle of business that they were at growth right before a sale? What was the worst that could happen? We would have no income from me. Would that really be so bad? Yeah, that would suck a lot. If I don't do this, I think it'll suck more. And so the clarity around that is, well, what's the worst that can happen? And is it as bad as how I feel now? Is a quick, easy way for clarity. And we haven't even gotten to anything about like values yet. And I think that comes into the next part of when we set an expectation for ourselves, it comes from this place of where we grow into something and find we have skills like Scott was mentioning that we didn't even know we had. How do you guys, once you've set that expectation, hold yourself to that? Because sometimes that's harder than the actual worst thing that can happen, right? When we're going through it, we're in the midst of it, and we've got to do this thing, and all of a sudden we've changed, but the rest of the world knows how we've always been. And now there's this new us that's showing up. And it could only be one tiny thing. It could be, I'm not going to eat sugar anymore. It could be, I need to find another job today. But all of a sudden there's a different kind of resistance and stuff that comes up because it's not normal anymore.
I remember having a discussion with some of my colleagues, actually also the people that we collaborate across the globe. And there is this quote, do you remember who you were before the world told you who you need to be or who you should be or who you ought to be? I think that constant drive into putting us into a box or fitting somewhere or fitting a picture or a description or whatever there is. And I think that for myself and for the coaching that I do with people or the how I wish to empower them, it's actually the one basic thing. Be really clear about what are your expectations. Are you living the dream that you would like to have, or did somebody, are there patterns and values from your life or from your past that you keep on repeating or you want to live out? Or is this actually what you would want it to be or you want to live out? Are you in the middle between my picture and their expectations? At least for me, it's my personal mindful small meditation that I do every day, centering myself and really knowing, okay, so where am I going? Why am I doing this? And is this deriving from what I want? My wishes, my thoughts, my desires. So constantly checking in and checking out. Coming from a corporate background myself also, this was actually something that to us women, I can say, was never actually not coached, nor it was never empowered to do so. It was more like, you're here to do this, to execute, and don't check in with yourself because that's kind of too emotional. I think that is a core activity that you need to check in with yourself every day.
Oh my gosh, you said emotional, and I think that's one of the most underutilized, biggest superpowers every single woman on this planet has, is our ability to understand our emotions, compartmentalize them to get through a situation, but then really use them to fuel transformation and change and connection.
Yeah.
Scott, do you have anything that you want to add there? Because I have a parenting story when you're done.
Part of it is that courage is so personal because you could, for example, look at public speaking. That is the one thing that most people are most afraid of doing. In fact, I think, well, they say that some people would rather die than get up in front of.
It's true. Death is third. Speaking is first.
Yeah. Wow. That's really something.
It's true. Not some people. That's a fact.
There are other people who thrive on it. And they get up in front of a crowd, and the only difference between a person, in this case, who is so afraid of speaking and a person who is like a duck in water for that, is what they think about in their own head. This is not a universal in all areas, but I think for the most part, people create their own reality. So if you just remind yourself of that, so you are in a new situation or you're trying to do something that is outside your comfort zone, change jobs from being in the corporate world to being an entrepreneur, it's settling at least to think, well, I get to decide how I respond to the fear and the unknown that I'm stepping into.
Mm-hmm.
And so many times, people who've already gone through the experience will say, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was a tragedy. And then afterwards, they've turned that into a victory. And how did they do that? Kind of step one after another.
You guys are talking about mindset and how we're learning from our actions and the outcomes of those actions. And I'm not saying consequences because that tends to be associated with just bad. Consequences can be amazingly joyful and beneficial too. They just might not look at it at first, or maybe they do look at it first, just like what you were saying. And here's my parenting story because it fits into, we've set an expectation and it moves into where we're going of how do we create a place and a space for others to make mistakes without us being impacted by that? How do we be this role model for others and then give them this space? One of my roles as a mother and one of my roles as an employer is to develop people. Take the skills that they have innately and continue to refine them and hone them and help them excel in those areas. It's also to find the places where the skills are lacking or need developed so that the least amount of pain through life, we're not hitting our head on the same wall all the time through our entire lives. So how do we do that? I'm going to tell a parenting story. It's a little easier. It might hit too close to home if I did an employer story. So we're going to stick with parenting because it's a little lighthearted. But it sets this up, and we can do this as leaders, and I do this in my role as well. So my little man, he woke up this morning and he just wanted to lay in bed. He got to lay in bed. He wanted to read a book. He got to read a book. Well, he gets up 90 minutes before we have to be out the door to go to school in the morning. He's got a period of time he can do whatever he wants. Part of getting around in the morning in this 90 minutes includes eating breakfast. So he wakes up at 7 o'clock. Our kitchen closes for breakfast at 8:15 in the morning. He decided today he was going to push that and see what happened. 8:10 rolls around. It's when he gets to choose how we go to school. Do we walk? Do we scoot? Do we bike? Do we drive? He gets to choose if he meets that time frame. Came and went. He's like, I don't care. It's too cold. Whatever you choose, mama. Then 8:15 came around and he came down and he was finally done at 8:16. And he told me, Mama, it's 8:16. And there were big tears, and I'm the most horrible mom in the whole world and everything because he's got to eat breakfast. He brings in all this stuff about his teacher and how when he says he's hungry at school, his teacher doesn't like him very much because it's really, well, basically it's rude and interruptive. He was using different words than that because from his perspective, he's just trying, can I get my mom to feed me after the kitchen closes? So I looked at him and I said, hey, Carter, how many times has that happened to you this year? And he goes, once. I said, yeah. And then today. So today makes twice in a whole school year. And I said, it's 8:16. It's probably like 8:18 now. And if I let you have breakfast after the kitchen closed, something that we agreed upon a long, long time ago, I'm lying to you about when the kitchen closes. And I'm not doing my job. And if I'm not telling you the truth and I'm not speaking up and being right all the time, I'm not being a good model for you. Honesty is one of our values in our house. Silence. And then more tears. I don't like you. Okay, that's fine. But in the end, he calmed down. We did a project. He drank a lot of water. He has a snack at 9 o'clock in the morning, 30 minutes after he goes to school. All is going to be right with the world. But maybe he'll make a different choice tomorrow. It's a natural consequence. We agreed on it. We set up the structure and then we let it play out. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. The second time was harder than the first time. Where this is going is setting up the space to make mistakes. Too much structure can be stifling. Enough structure that people can still make their own choices, us included. People can still make their own choices and see how their choices fit into larger pictures is really important. And when we apply that in the workplace, deadlines are like the bane of my existence. I'm horrible at enforcing them. I enforce them because I think I need structure to help hold people accountable to that. I have not figured out how to do it myself, so it's really hard to hold other people accountable for this space that I struggle with too. I still have a big space of making mistakes when it comes to if we're going to set a deadline and we're going to get it done and here are all the moving pieces. When it's a hard deadline, there are no problems. When it's a soft deadline, that's when there are problems. But those soft deadlines are just as equally important to the forward momentum of a project or an objective or meeting a client expectation or doing that little bit of extra to put positioning and marketing and sales and finances all in the right place at the right time to have the strongest company that we can, to be the strongest leader for our employees to show up and have a space to take a risk and feel comfortable taking that risk, knowing that they might mess up, knowing that there might be a mistake, knowing that there might be some outcome that they don't like and they get passed over or they don't get to do what they want to do or they didn't achieve some goal. I think those things are really necessary to allow us to keep moving forward. After that story and switching from the one of overall mindset overall and making an expectation and then holding it, I would love to hear, Zala and Scott, what you guys think about this concept of a space to make mistakes.
I think that is really, really, really crucial. I think that allowing yourself and others to, find their process and their way and find their own way to make themselves accountable is very, very important. Your story, on the other hand, reminded me of the conversations that I have, especially with a high school population or primary school population that I work with, because we talk a lot about internet usage and social media and privacy and doing it responsibly. This totally reminds me of the conversations that we have when we have one really important question. Do I do something because I know somebody is watching me and I will get in trouble because I don't do it right or correctly or if I mess up? Or is it everything that I do a step in the direction of learning myself, for myself and others, how to do something right, no matter if somebody catches me or sees me or somebody will find out what I did. The space for making mistakes is so important for our integrity also, because it allows us to find the perfect balance between the freedom that we on one hand crave, and also between the structure and the teamwork, also, the kind of reporting and the kind of cooperation and collaboration that we do every day with ourselves, with our families, with our children, our dogs, maybe extended family, and also our companies, our workforce, and also with the market that we work in.
So I think that there's an interplay between the environment in which you find yourself and yourself. You can create an environment in which people can really blossom and flourish, or you can create an environment in which they kind of go in on themselves. Within that, I'm confident that there's a nice balance, because to allow a person to make mistakes and to think of that as a learning experience, and based on this, we can go forward, that's great. At a particular point, there might be a little gray area, but there is a point at which these mistakes are so grievous, or it's just such a bad fit that not everything is, well, I don't want to phrase it this way, not everything is forgivable, but sometimes you just have to move on. As a supervisor, as a leader, it's kind of discerning, how can I nurture this person along for the benefit of the group, and at what point is that, well, perhaps suggesting that there's a bit different or a better path to go. And man, that's really difficult. From the personal point of view, it's not the issue itself, it's how you respond to the issue. There's a setback in life. What do? First of all, I say honor what happened. So don't pretend that it didn't hurt. Don't pretend that, well, everything's going to be okay. You can go through the grieving process, but you can be determined that because this was so bad, I'm just going to make sure that it's going to turn around and it's going to be the best thing that ever happened to me. And that's that conscious decision that you can have. I'm sure that there are some underlying principles that are true for both. It's just that they're applied differently.
Okay, and the big question of the day. We've been talking about a lot of things and a lot of different facets of what it means to lead and emulate leading. And I want to know from you guys, why is Dorothy Boyd, why is the leadership skills that she portrays, why is that bold today?
In every situation, or coming from my situation, a lot of people will expect you to fail. A lot of people will warn you, a lot of people will say, and especially for women, I have to point out, I maybe do apologize, but I don't. But it's like whenever a woman gets like a leadership position, or maybe a team lead or something, we always discuss this point of, yes, but how will you manage the family and the business, and how will you divide the time, and so on. And basically for men, this question never even arises. And I think that the boldness of actually what we discussed today is so important, because I think it's a really good way to show somebody that you are not afraid, that you're courageous, that you're fierce, and you're ready to step up, step forward, and just say, this is what I decided, this is what I want to pursue, this is how I want to empower also you and empower also others, and I'm bringing my best self to the table. That's the most important thing I can do. I'm bringing my best to the table. And also, coming back to the fact that a lot of times we need to give space to other people so we can empower them, we can walk the talk and inspire them. But when we give people the space, I think the boldness of it is also that we let people go. So we have them pursue their own way, but we give them that sense of, I have your back. I'm really honest about it. I have your back. Whatever happens, I trust you. I have your back. I'm here. I'm maybe in the backstage, but I am here. I'm here with my whole self.
All right, Scott, what would you add to that?
One of the reasons to go to college is that you're exposed to things you were not exposed to while you were growing up, and then that can help you to become yourself. Part of the reasoning behind that is that you have to be able to imagine a space before you can step into it. And women, have this early childhood training that they are supposed to be in this particular type of box. And when you have someone like Dorothy Boyd who comes along, she can be a role model. She can show something that hasn't been seen before. And it occurs to other women and men for that matter too. Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, that's a possibility. That is some space that we can walk into. So once it can be imagined, and once you have been given an environment where you at least have a half a chance of being able to make it be possible, then you can go for it. And if enough people, and in this case, if enough women go for it, maybe there'll be success. And that's why I'm so optimistic about the future, because I think technology and the internet is a game changer. It changes the power. So often on the internet, it doesn't matter what college you went to, or what degree you have, or what your spouse is like, or what your title is, whether or not you're a woman or a man. It's that, can you get the job done? That allows for a space for men and women to create an entirely new world. And so that's why I'm optimistic about the future.
And there you have it. And the mic drops. You will find the program notes for Lead Like Dorothy Boyd at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com/P49. That is thevoiceofboldbusiness.com/P like program 49. You can also search Lead Like Dorothy Boyd. When you go to the website, make sure and rate the program. And you'll notice where you can subscribe to listen to get more Voice of Bold Business Radio programs as they air every Tuesday and Friday. Get them on your preferred listening platform. Now, we've got to talk about this from your perspective. You define what being a leader today means. You define from your experiences and add to how leaders and how businesses work today. So share your story and experiences about this conversation of what it means to be a leader. And I want to know, how do you lead like Dorothy Boyd?
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Duell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.